China has constructed the world's most sophisticated system of internet content management.
中国工信部宣布全面清理虚拟私人网络 VPN。
Virtual private networks.
VPNs are becoming increasingly popular in the country.
Critics say Apple is enabling China's censorship of the internet.
We're going to dig a little deeper now into a story that we just touched on last week. Legislation in both China and Russia that has made masking who you are online, where you are, in order to have better access to news and information much more difficult. Those in search of websites and services their governments don't want them to find have had one reliable tool to help them hide their digital footprint: VPNs, virtual private networks. Up until now, China has taken a selective approach to prohibiting the use of VPNs, usually choosing to look away when people tunneled their way through the great firewall Beijing has put in place to regulate access to the internet. China's new approach to bar access to VPNs requires the support of U.S.-based companies like Apple, which has obeyed an order from Beijing to remove VPN apps from its Chinese app store. Russia has had a more open internet than China's, but it's just passed a new law targeting VPNs and other proxy servers. The justification offered by the Kremlin that it's doing this to stop the promotion of extremist content online hasn't fooled anybody. In both countries, the pattern is unmistakable. The powers that be are out to limit and, in effect, decide what you can or cannot see and do online. Our starting point this week is Beijing.
To make it easy to explain what a VPN is, it's really just a secure tunnel to the internet.
So you can sit in China and you can use a VPN based in Sweden, and you will see everything that the Swedish internet sees because it will look as if you are coming from Sweden.
And now if that channel is cut off, does it mean that people inside China will get cut off from information around the world?
Then it is getting elevated to warfare. This cat and mouse game is getting increasingly sophisticated.
I'm afraid the cat is getting the upper hand.
Make that cats. Russia and China have chosen different ways to police and restrict the use of VPNs. The Russians have flat out banned them and all proxy servers through a new law that takes effect November 1st. China changed its law this past January, requiring developers to get government licenses if they want their VPN apps to remain available on the Chinese market. Beijing's approach is more subtle than the Kremlin's, partly because it already has tools at its disposal that Russia does not.
The way that Russia regulates the internet is in some ways very different from the way that China regulates the internet. China's regulations are backed by a very complicated Great Firewall of China. And so they take a lot of very advanced technical measures to block things in transit. Russia, on the other hand, has only extremely primitive internet censorship technology.
Russia's approach is different, not necessarily because Russia doesn't want to follow this kind of censorship at the level of the infrastructure, but because it can't. The kind of infrastructure and mechanisms that have been built up in China over 20 years, it's a long-standing project, because of course this is an arms race.
Apple became a key component in this story when it announced on August 1st that it was pulling the plug on the VPN apps it offers its customers in China. Apple was an easy target for Beijing because the company does not allow for open-source app development. Users who want apps for their Apple products must shop for them at the company's app store, unlike Android phones, which allow their users to acquire apps from anywhere. Apple's closed shop offers the company more control, but it also makes Apple easier for authoritarian governments to control. It's one-stop shopping for both private users and state censors.
because there is only one Apple store, whereas there are over 400 Android stores in China. And so getting every single one of them to take down every single VPN application is a much, much harder task. It is extremely easy to carry out censorship in the App Store simply by leaning on one company. Apple has made it extremely simple for them to do so.
Apple is not the first internet company that give in to China's demands and controls. It follows a list of many companies. China is a big market. The report just came out a couple of days ago that Chinese internet users now numbered more than 700 million. That is more than the total population of Europe. So can you give up their market?
Apple's market share in China is very important to them. And I would caution Apple that in China, you know, they're trying to build their own internet services and their own smartphones. So they may have market share today, but Apple may be pushed out and wish they would have fought for that principle when they look back.
Apple is acutely aware of the price Western tech companies pay for riling Beijing. Twitter and Facebook were both legal in China until 2009, before butting heads with the authorities over censorship and getting banned. Twitter has effectively been replaced by Sino Weibo, a microblogging service that cooperates with censors. Still, a source at Twitter reportedly told a tech site last year that despite the ban, it still had 10 million users in China, accessing Twitter via VPNs. Those users could well become casualties of the new VPN policy, and they won't be the only ones.
I actually worry about other avenues which are getting stifled by banning or blocking of VPNs. So academics have been complaining, saying, look, I'm not a terrorist, I'm not even political, I'm not a dissident, I'm not doing anything that's wrong, I'm not trying to access content that's troubling, I just want to look at the latest research in my field. I think the other thing that is really critical is, what about business?
In a globalized world, a business needs the internet, they need communication. China has come a long way. Now it's the second largest economy in the world. Everybody needs access to information. This is not even about politics. But if you let politics trump everything, it could be self-defeating.
Blocking VPNs 100% is an economic problem for them. And there's a struggle going on in China of saying, hey, you know, we want to control the political conversation, but if we do that, we're going to lose economically. How they're going to solve that potentially is they're going to have approved VPNs that only the government controls. So it's about control, I think, in China versus outright blocking.
Technology travels fast. Those out to stop it are seldom far behind. And watching this game of cat and mouse in China are plenty of other governments, copycats, in waiting. Prepare for some of them to do the same.
There are many countries all over the world, including Russia and Iran, that look at China's heavily censored internet as a model for how they would like to go forward. Internet censorship is also extremely common in Turkey, where it is extremely political. There's a lot of censorship of journalists, of political content, and as a result, the use of VPNs in Turkey is routine.
There's a real danger of the draconian control and the bans being exported and being learned by other countries. Think about it. China has money. It has government support. It has a market. They can sell the technology. It can be shared with governments around the world. We should not take our internet freedom for granted. In China, in Hong Kong, United States, and around the world.